Oh, there's the line. Hello. We were just all laughing here. Ashley Ainsley, co-founder of Colour in Tech, here today with an amazing duo to talk about a really important topic which affects all of us, regardless of what we do, where we work, how we work, what we look like, or even how good our work is, frankly, which is around to negotiating your salary as a minority in the workplace. This conversation came about because we actually had a Clubhouse room, which we were talking about the topic, and there was so much outpouring of well, a lot, shall I say, and this was a topic in which we definitely thought we could all add significant value in this in this. But before I introduced Mandy and Jeffrey, what I will ask everyone to do is, if you do have any comments, if you do have any questions, we want to keep this iterative. We do want to make sure this is an interesting conversation. So please do log into the YouTube and make sure you are submitting your comments via that. And don't be shy. There's no silly questions or anything as well. We want to ultimately be here to help. But without further ado, I'm going to kind of ask Mandy and Jeffrey to give a little bit of a lowdown on their work and who they are and their backgrounds, etc., just so we can all level set. If you'd like to find out more about Colour in Tech, obviously go to www.colourintech.org, available on all search engines. And yeah, if you want to find out about me, just go there anyway. I'll come round and I'll introduce myself at the end. But look, we're all here, we're all friends, let's have a good conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to actually ask Mandy, because we were just talking about the last time we saw each other was BC. I'm not talking about the year zero, although black doesn't crack. What I am saying is before coronavirus, and that's how long it's actually been. So Mandy, why don't you share with everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. In fact, the day I got home, that's when I first heard about the coronavirus, and I was like, that's weird. It feels like eons ago. Anyway, hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Mandy Bynum McLaughlin. I am indeed the CEO of the Race Equality Project and co-founder with Ashley's co-founder, Dion McKinsey. And my career has been spent as a sales leader in tech, going public with companies, so Yelp, SurveyMonkey, and joined New Relic right after they went public. And then while at New Relic, transitioned somehow to the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the global workforce. And since then have been doing my own consulting. I do two types of consulting. One, I work with diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting companies, larger ones, to create their sales engines. And I work with tech companies individually to build up their DEI strategy. The Race Equality Project is the birthing after the creation of the Race Equality Index that companies in the US and ideally in the UK and the rest of Europe will be taking to benchmark their companies' practices, protocols, and all of the systems that they have in place to create equity, especially for structurally excluded racial groups. That's me. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Amazing. And Jeffrey.
Yes. So I'm Jeffrey Williams. As I said there, the global head of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Dr. Martens. I've been in the diversity space now for about a decade. Previously, an organization called Thomson Reuters as their global head of D&I. And prior to that, I actually did something completely different and worked in the entertainment industry, managing songwriters, DJs, and producers, which is always a very interesting leap from one to the other. And I'm also the co-founder of Rocking Your Teens, a social enterprise that works with young people aged between 13 and 14 to think about their career aspirations and how they manage their mental health in this ever-evolving society. So that's me.
Amazing. Well, I'm super chuffed. A little bit about me. Ashley Ainsley, co-founder of Colour in Tech, set it up about 5 years ago with the mission to try and help get more ethnic minorities into the technology industry, and then hopefully when they're there actually succeed. And as a result of that, through our work, we've worked with a number of different organizations, but my passion is always supporting people to be their best as well, whether that be as a leader in the team or whatever, I suppose however I come across everybody. So for this conversation, we've actually got like a range of like kind of pre-arranged, I suppose, kind of like topic areas that I want to talk about. And just to like level set, there's lots of different parts in which we can even talk about this topic. It's quite broad and there's a whole masterclass. In terms of housekeeping though, Jeffrey is only available for the next kind of 55 minutes or so. So if you do have any questions specifically for Jeffrey, do put them in the chat and we'll try and make sure that we come to them before he has to jump and go and do daddy duties, I think it is. So with that, I suppose the first question that I'll ask our panelists actually is, and this is kind of a loaded question because I certainly have a very particular answer, but like I think this is an important one because a lot of people don't necessarily even conceptualize this when they think about it. But how do you know, when is the right time to review your salary? When does this even start to become something you should be thinking about?
For me,
I'll go with Maddie first.
Thank you, Ashley. For me, the moment I am offered a job, it is important for me to understand what my cohorts are making. So anyone who is in the same position, same experience, tenure at the company, I want to know if we're all being paid equally and how a salary negotiation, how raises are gone about in the company. So as soon as I get there, I already have the right expectations around when I should be looking for a salary increase, because often companies at the beginning of a quarter or at the beginning of a year will automatically have some sort of salary differences being made. And that's typically the time that you should know. If it's not at the very beginning, it is at those times. So asking anyone on the people team, the HR team about like when those times are, I think that's always a good thing to keep in your head as to when to start having those conversations with people.
Jeffrey?
So yeah, Mandy's correct. Every organization should have a pay review. And at that point, when that's coming, and because they start talking about all the fantastic things that you've been doing throughout the year and how, and I think it's that point of that you need to think about how you've presented what you've been doing throughout the year. And then at that point is when you can have the conversation around your pay and the increment that they're expecting you to get and possibly your views around what you were expecting as well. I think when you're just offered the role as well, it's good to understand that question around pay reviews and how can you, how do they manage that? What are the things that you need to demonstrate to be able to kind of lean into getting, a good pay increment? And also, how do they address it? Because I think sometimes if they don't have a structure for that, that's also part of the issue when you're trying to ask for more money.
Yeah, got it. And from our work, we encourage people to be thinking about it almost even maybe a stage before that, even when you're going through the process and actually what roles you're looking for, what are they transparent with what they're paying, and if they're not, why not? What does that tell you? And also, therefore, how does that compare to the market? Because this kind of brings me on to that next question. And Mandy, it might be similar to some of the work you've done in sales. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I'm trying to make the link there. But, from my perspective, like, how do you actually go about that benchmarking? Because you said you want to know about like what other people in the organization pay. Maybe they're outside of the organization, your peers. How do you? What do you do?
Oh gosh, there's so many ways to go about it. So I want to be specific to like a particular situation. So hopefully it will seem within context. There's a couple ways to go about it. This may not be like the most. What's the word I'm looking for?
It's some real stuff.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
That's what I'm looking for.
You go ahead and you get on Slack. You make friends with people who are on the people team, specifically around payroll. You pretend you're in the circle and you start making alliances. Okay. And then you want to understand the system. Which, hey, how do y'all do pay reviews? Like, do we do pay equity audits here? I'm just curious. Oh, do you like brownies? Like, you don't want to bribe them, but you want to be able to have that information around how the system works, not where people are favored or what people have to do to get pay raises. You want to understand how the system works, because then you can understand better how the company is looking at pay raises, because it's often very different than you might assume. We all tend to assume that, like, our manager, if we're an individual contributor, our manager has like all this power to change our salary. Not true at all. So your manager is actually more of your accomplice. So you want to be able to know what the system is and also be able to work with your accomplice / your manager to say, like, how do we go about getting me a raise? What are the things that I need to do? How do I help you when you go into talent reviews? Show that, like, I deserve a significant raise. And mind you, like, if there is a particular system there, it's going to be very structured as to when, if you're being paid equally, which hopefully you are, there's going to be a particular system, and there should be protocols and things written out around when you can get a pay raise. If you're working at a startup, a very small startup, that's a little bit of a different conversation. But again, it's all about understanding the structure and the system through which pay raises and talent reviews are happening.
Got it. We've got a question that's come in from Emmanuel, so maybe I'll ping this over to Jeffrey as one. But so, what do you say about organisations that don't have those formal pay reviews, don't have those things? I know Mandy just mentioned if you're working at startups, sometimes it's a bit different. When do you bring up that conversation? When does it start to become an agenda item? If this is just like, well, you're in role, let's get going.
Do you know something? I would say you bring it up as soon as you start. If they don't have the process, I think you ask the question of how do I get a pay rise here? If you don't have a process, what are the things that make that decision? I think you need to ask that question straight up front. And then I think it's that piece of, once you've been doing the role for a while and you've built the relationships, to Mandy's point, you will find that they do something, because they have to do something to make those decisions. It's not done in a vacuum. So they may not have a formalized process, but there are conversations that happen that you'd need to become privy to. And then I think it's also, as you speak to your line manager, it's that piece of, okay, kind of clarifying on a number of occasions that you want to understand this process because you see yourself in the organization for a while and you want to make sure that, everyone's happy in the working environment. So I kind of would play it that way, in the sense of, arts from when you start. Don't wait to try and answer that question, because it's part of your negotiation, and it's also part of your package to understand how you manage that.
Yeah. And one thing that we certainly say is, like, there's a whole kind of, and we're not totally getting onto this in terms of how you go about it when you're getting a job, although we'll definitely touch onto it in the different parts. But there's an angle about what you do when you're in a company and outside of a company and coming in. But what we'd certainly say is, like, in terms of like that negotiation that you have at pay time, when you're getting into an organization, definitely put that on the table and say, great, when's the pay review? When's the next time we discuss this topic? So you know exactly when that's coming. You know exactly what that looks like. You've got that written down somewhere so you can refer back to it. So at 6 months, at Christmas, you're having that discussion again. If you know that bonuses are paid out annually and you've missed it in June because of the cutoff point was May, like, well, when's my next conversation? I don't want to be working another 18 months before it. Like, what are we going to do for my situation? So make sure that you're having those conversations early, because otherwise you just wait and you just drift and and that's what it is. It's just floating in the wind, just waiting for something to happen.
But actually, if you want to drift, that's fine.
That's fine too. Yeah,
that's fine too.
That's fine too, but not fine for the wallet.
No.
No.
So here's a question, and this is like going a bit off piste, yeah. So I know we said, there's a bit about equal pay and, like, hopefully people are doing that. But what about the world which we exist in, where we know that doesn't happen a lot? Or what about this world where we know Joe Blogs over there is doing the same role, and I think that they're getting paid more than me, or I know they're getting paid more than me? Like, how does that factor into how you have that conversation?
So I would say there's two things that you need to do. So there's one where you need to ask your HR team to do an audit, a pay review of your team, and benchmark it against the external market. So one, is everyone in the team paid equitable or fairly? And then how does this role benchmark against the external market? So effectively, are they also paying you in line with what you could be getting outside of the organization?
But then Jeffrey, they come back and they're like, "Oh yeah, we do that all the time. Like, yeah, we're competitive."
Well, you didn't let me finish there. I'd say you do your own at that time. You do your own audit. So you go to market and actually, I think when you start the conversation, you say, "I did an audit, and this is what I found with these 5 other organizations that are your competitors." Right. So then basically, you're giving them your own findings, and then they have to go and do their findings. Then when they come back, you don't have a conversation and say, "Oh my gosh, Mandy's getting paid more than me." You say, "I'm here to do this job. You hired me at this point. You hired me at this level. I've now progressed and learned these additional things." So you build your business case as to why you need more money, but it's not based around the fact of, oh, it's unfair. Bobby's paid more than me. Mandy's paid more than me. It's about that feeling of I'm delivering in my job. I'm going above what I'm meant to be going above based along my contract, so that I feel like I'm deserving in this. I think a lot of the time, when we have conversations about salary, it's the I, and that's nice, but it doesn't always get what you want. You have to kind of go out as in, we are trying to work together to have collaboration to make sure that I'm happy, that you're happy, that we all deliver and hit our objectives. And what will get us there is if you pay me more.
Yeah, and I think I want to add to that, and hopefully it'll answer the question we just had. It's kind of like, and the way I think about it is, as Black people, we need to know when we get pulled over by the cops, at least in the US, what our rights are, what we should know, what should be the behavior and what should not be the behavior. And again, like, this is not being pulled over by the cops, but like, when you know your stuff, you know what your rights are, and what should be happening. Like, if you are to go to your manager and say, "Hey, I noticed that Jed his salary is like 20K more than me. I'm just curious to know what that is." They should be terrified. They should be terrified that you found out. And if they didn't already know that, they should be pooping their pants because somehow they found out that you're not being paid equitable, and that's going to show up in, the Guardian, that they're not paying people equally, especially if you're a person of color. So it would behoove you to ask a certain question. So Jeffrey was saying this a little bit earlier, like when HR and the people team are discussing pay structures, they're not just going like this. I mean, some people do, but there's typically like some sort of standard book that people are going off of to figure out what pay ranges are for certain job levels. So if you can understand what that company is that they're looking in the US, a lot of people use Radford. If you can understand like what that system is, and you can usually go onto their websites and find out what the roles are, and then once those pay raises are established, they typically will slot a role into like whatever the job level is for that role. And they're not always like to like, but these are the types of things, like the more you know about them, the more you can say like, okay, when I go to my manager, I think I'm this level based on what we talked about. These are the skills that I have. These are my responsibilities. And that seems like that's this level up here, not this one that I have. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do we go about leveling me up? So that's less of a like, I deserve a pay raise and building a business case. It's more of a like, let's make sure that I'm being paid equally because I don't want you to look bad.
Got it. So it's very much, it's not about this is unfair, look how bad things are, like Joe over there is getting X and I'm only getting Y. It's very much like, this is the value that I bring.
Yeah.
And if I'm not bringing that value, let's have that conversation. And if we agree that I'm bringing that value, then where's the value returning back to me?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't return back to me, then what does that mean for the company?
Yes.
And I would say also that, organizations that I've worked in, they do have a clear leveling structure that you can go and look at on your intranet. I'd also say, in a weird way, go and look at your annual report and see how much money they've invested in people within the annual report, because that also aligns to how much money they have to provide pay rises. And I think I'm sure you'll touch on this later on, but also, it might not always be about the actual pay rise. Your baseline salary. It could be other things that you need as well. So, you know, think broadly.
Yeah, and we'll definitely come on to that. But before I do so I know you said that there's like some of these ranges and some of their that kind of banding. But sometimes, you know, I've worked in organizations where these bands are still a bit, you know, there's a lot of variability in them. You know, we say we have a band, it's like, you know, it's a rubber band depending on who's asking on this end of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how much do you actually ask for? You know, say you find out you're in the band maybe, or you're at the bottom of the band, or you're coming into the band. How much do I actually ask for?
Well, if you're a strings player, you're probably going to be at the lower end of the band. If you're a drummer and you want to get in the band, like that's no, I'm just kidding. Again, it's figuring out like just being curious. So if let's say they use Radford and it's like for this role, there's a range between 60 and 65. And your person on the people team says, we usually pay at the 50% mark. Okay, you usually pay at the 50% mark, but what are the circumstances with which like people are at the upper level of that band or the lower level? And these are all like really, really great questions to ask anyway, because they're important. And when you ask them, the people who are making these decisions, they're often not the person making the decision. They're just like following the rules. And so it's like, I don't actually know why we do that. Let me look into that. And this is just your way so that we're not thinking that we're in the 90s and in a movie where we have to like, you know, whip out the PowerPoint and like walk into the boss's office, which I have done. It wasn't in the 90s, it was in the aughts.
Wow.
And so like, here's what I deserve a pay raise. And like, I was so nervous, I lost sleep. Like, that's not the way things should be anymore. And if you're working for a company like that, maybe time to leave anyway. But yes, I'm going to keep coming back to this theme of like, the more you know, the more you grow.
Got it. Jeffrey, anything to add on that as well in terms of how much?
So I would say ask for more than what you think you're going to get. So always ask above. And especially if you know the banding, you know, ask for the top of the banding. And then, but knowing that they're probably not going to give you that. And it will then slide down to something that, you know, you are comfortable with, but you've asked the question and you understand the process.
Yeah. And I just to see this comment, same in the US, like it is very taboo to talk to your colleagues about what they're making and what everyone else is making. So that's why it's important to get to know the people team and understand the system and understand the bands that people are within. So you don't have to ask your colleagues. You can just work straight with those who are establishing the salaries themselves.
The process, yeah. Because it's not about knowing what someone is paid per se. It is about understanding, okay, if I'm at a level 1, everyone at level 1 should be paid between this umbrella and that umbrella. And if I don't sit within that, then there's work that needs to happen. So I do. And if I do, how do I move up? And how does that happen in an incremental way? So yeah.
Got it.
And again, just Amanda.
So hold on, give me 2 seconds because I want to dive into her first question a little bit. So thanks, Amanda, for the questions, and then I'll come back to your second one. But just on that, Jeffrey, there was that little bit about it's written in the contract that we're not allowed to discuss salary. Like, you know, being in HR yourself, you've seen lots of employment contracts. You know, what's your views on that?
I find it interesting that they put that because people do discuss their salary. When you become a friend with the person that you work with, you're going to discuss how much you are paid and how much maybe not how much your bonus is, but definitely how much you're paid and how you're going to each negotiate and push for the changes you need. So I haven't seen that very often or at all actually in my time.
I'm not sure if it's illegal. I mean,
I don't think it doesn't feel illegal. It doesn't feel legal, but
they probably could never enforce that anyway.
Oh, they can't because you look at what happens in lots of different organizations where people decide they're going to put everyone's salaries up on the intranet or whatever, and then that's the conversation. So yes, it's an interesting one. You might want to speak to an employment lawyer to see whether there's something there as well. But yeah.
So what I would say from my observations on that is like, people will say things to do things. Obviously, I've not seen your employment contract. I'm not an employment lawyer. I'm not going to tell you to do something that I don't like. It's not my area of expertise. But what I will say is people talk. And if you're not having that conversation, someone else will have the conversation. Yeah. So so definitely be thinking about what that means for you. Like it's very convenient for them to say you don't talk about your salary to everybody else when everybody else is talking and getting more. Yeah. So think about what works for you. How do you know? How do you present what you know as well? It's not like, oh, I spoke to Mandy and Jeffrey and I know this is exactly what they want and what they're doing. It's like, oh, well, you know, having done my research, I know that this is where we're at. You know, how? Well, I've done my research. Like, do you know what I mean? You don't have to get into these things. It's a bit like the politicians, you know. How did Bojo pay for that wallpaper? You know, he paid for it. Where did the money come from? He paid for it. He paid for it. So this is the same principle, yeah? You have to think a little bit about how you are gathering that information, where it's coming from. And of course, we're British in the UK. People don't like to openly say, oh, you know, I'm on this or I'm on that or that, I'm on that. You don't have to. You can infer things. It's it's why we have friends in the workplaces. Think about it like collective bargaining. You know, I might share with you a bit if you share with me, and ultimately, if you end up getting less than me, you want to know. It's true. If I'm getting paid more, you want to know, don't you? So, and if I'm getting, so it works for everybody in that sense. That's what I would think about it. But we're all humans. Let's have a conversation. It probably works better for both of us.
I think that's the key thing is like we can be so scared to talk about salary with people on our team, but it's like if they find out you're being paid less, it doesn't affect them. They're probably like, what? That's so weird. And then and the other thing, like never go into this alone.
Yeah.
Like Michael Jackson says before he was.
Bro, hold on, what quote are you coming on there?
She's like, oh.
He said at one time, you are not alone. Whether it's good or bad thing, but like you are not alone. And I will tell you, anytime I go into anything where I'm negotiating pay, salary, I phone a friend. I say, does this sound right to you? What should I be saying differently? And like, even if that person doesn't know anything more than you, like it's always good to have a sounding board. And we definitely don't want to ignore that in any circumstance.
Yeah. This is where like mentors and confidants and people in the workplace, friends, colleagues, sounding boards. Like, do you know what I mean?
I think sounding boards and also playing out the scenario. So you're going to have this conversation. Talking about money is the most uncomfortable thing, like it can be. And I think there's a couple of things before we even talk about how you negotiate. You have to think about your relationship with money. And do you think you are worthy of receiving it? Which is I know it's a random thing. I was like, I go to work, I deserve to be paid. But it's that process of how do you process money? What do you think about money? And then as you start to have that conversation, can you play out the ask, the response, your response? How do you remain calm? How do you not get emotional about it? Because someone's telling you, oh, I'm not going to give you that money. And you're like, but I'm worth it. I deserve it. And how do you kind of move away from that and be like, actually, you know something? I've done my research. I understand the leveling. I understand the bell curve that exists within our leveling. I would like to receive this, or I want this. Actually, let me say I want this. And then you've got to leave it at their kind of door to decide what they're going to give you. But it's that kind of full circle of, I'm good with money. I deserve money. I'm now going to go and ask for some money, and I'm going to receive it.
Yes, and you deserve the money that you're going to ask for.
Yeah.
It's a value exchange. This is what I bring. Why wouldn't you pay me this? That's how I think about it. So I know Amanda had a second question, and I don't want to make sure that I don't want to miss it. But I didn't capture it before. So yeah. So in the case, how do you recommend to gauge how much to ask for and what's worth? I suppose we've kind of covered that a little bit. You do the benchmarking and all of that stuff. So then there's that.
I'll ask for one more thing. Or I will say one more thing. If you're working for a private company or even a public company, there's equity can be that one thing that like there's a big wide band. It's like a headband of like how much people get and when they get it. And oftentimes people are given equity as like a way of keeping you at the company, because a lot of times that equity doesn't vest for like 6 months or so and you don't actually get it. But that's a really easy way for you to leverage and say like, okay, if you can't raise my salary, like what kind of equity can I get? What kind of RSUs can I get? Because that's still money and it's still free money for the most part. And we don't want to, forget about how good of a negotiating piece that could be.
Yeah. So actually, let's come on to that, because a lot of people think, okay, well, money, or okay, we'll come on to what happens if they say no, but we'll come on to that in a little bit. But what are some of those other things that you can, that you can argue for? I've got like a whole list of stuff as well. But yeah, Mandy, obviously you've dropped a few mentions in there. Are there other things that come to mind as well? There's a couple that close to my heart. I'll throw some out. Annual leave,
and development. You want to do your MBA? Well, they fund that.
Yeah,
So
development, leave.
So yeah, definitely. Like what? Yeah, what can you pay for? Sorry, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I'm gonna say medical and all those bits as well. If you don't already have that, things that help. I think things that enhance your life and help you either grow and or move on to your next chapter is what you're meant to ask for.
Yeah, and it behooves them to also develop you because it retains you. But managers are often, their bonus is deterrent or distinguished based on whether they can retain people. And if they can't retain people, oftentimes that's considered into their bonus. So if people are willing to pay for you to go to some sort of workshop or some sort of like class that's for a full semester, like continuing studies, that's good for you and the people you work for. So it's always thinking about like what's good for them and me, but what's mostly good for me. But like, how can I make them look good in the process so they'll feel more likely to want to do it?
Yeah. And then one thing that we did touch on, bonuses, because that's always in lots of contracts discretionary. And again, like your base salaries might all be nice, but there's there's a band. It's like a black hole. Like you jump in, you don't know what you're going to come out with. Do you know what I mean? Bonus. So where does this factor into this conversation as well? Is that something you can negotiate? Is it something you should be looking at and benchmarking? Is it kind of just, well, it's up to them, so I take that off the table?
I'm gonna fill y'all in on something because I have led teams. I've led teams of teams. Every quarter, every 6 months, every year, there's always, let's think about taxes. There's always like, we have this extra budget that we have to get rid of, or we have this money that we need to distribute. And oftentimes a VP will come to a director and say, I have, this amount of bonus. Can you distribute that throughout your team? And oftentimes it'll either go to the top 2 players because they want to retain them, or people will distribute it across the team, but you want to be on that list somehow. And the only way to be on that list is to understand what that looks like. So the more you understand the way that the actual business works, the more you can think about, okay, well, if that's happening once a quarter and it hasn't happened to me, what do I need to do to be in that top 2? So it's simple things like that are, again, when you come back to the conversations, it's less about like giving me a raise and giving me a bonus I deserve. It's like, what are the things that I need to do to make sure that I am in that spot every time?
Yeah. And Jeffrey, any of your thoughts on bonuses as well? Is that something that people should negotiate, can negotiate? Is it, is it just good luck?
No, I think it's, so in my world, where I've come from, it's not always so easy to negotiate being a part of the bonus scheme or the bonus structure. I think it's making sure that you understand if they have one, and then getting to understand when do I become eligible to be a part of that. And then when you're asking for a pay rise or some incremental returns, you could say, actually, if you can't afford to up my salary, I feel like I've been performing really well. Do you want to, give me a bonus, put me in the bonus scheme? And then you talk about what you're expecting to see. And I think, again, for everywhere that I've worked and led at, there is a structure where you can see at different levels how much your bonus should be, what percentages you should be receiving, and then what's it's based on, whether it's based on your performance or the company's performance. And again, you can ask those questions. And maybe that's always the bit that you could say, something, can I get this one-off bonus? But I don't want it to be based on my performance. I'd like it to be based on the company's performance because the company's doing really well. So that means you get more in your pocket. So I think that's how in my world, that's how I've always negotiated it and kind of looked at it.
And one lesson that I've learned, sometimes depending on what the company's doing, you definitely don't want it tied to the company as well.
Yeah, on reverse. Yeah,
like, I don't use the company's doing badly as an excuse for you not to negotiate your own salary as well, because my performance isn't, I'm not in control. I'm not the CEO. I'm not in control of how the company does. Yeah. So my own performance has been good. So that doesn't mean I should be hit, because what happens if I don't get compensated, I walk. Like, do you know what I mean? Because I'm a good performer, I can go and find something else. I can go and do something else. So don't take company's performance, if it's negative, as a reason for why you shouldn't be doing stuff as well, because there is always a budget to retain good people. It will almost cost more to retain somebody, or it will always be cheaper to retain somebody than to like hire your replacement as well. So don't forget that, so to speak, as well.
That's why I say, read the annual report, like read your company's annual report, because it shows the growth trajectory, it shows the plans that they have for the organization. So then you're in the know. And I think sometimes, people of color, Black people, we don't do that. We just go, oh, well, I'm going to talk to my manager. And as Mandy keeps saying, it's that piece of understanding the 360 of the company that you're working at, and understanding, okay, so they have this vision by 2024, they're going to be X. I'm part of that vision. So how do I play my part in that vision? And also, how do I negotiate so that I receive what I'm owed within that process?
Yeah.
Amazing.
And I think it's what I always tell folks is, especially as women, we are so bad when it comes to loyalty. And what I mean by that is, like, we always default to loyalty to our company for some reason. And it takes us so long to like get our heads out of our butts and be like, oh, there's other stuff out there for me. There are other things. I am skilled, I am valued. And so it is so important, no matter what job you're in, no matter how long you think you're going to be there, keep that Rolodex hot. And what a Rolodex is, it's this wheel of paper that has people's names on it. It's now called LinkedIn. And you want to be continually connecting with people and like learning what they do. People who do the same job as you, what are the things that they're into? What are the skills that they use? Like I tell you, I reach out to people on LinkedIn all the time, be like, hey, can we chat for 30 minutes? I just want to get to know you and see what challenges you're facing. And like, that is, you get so much from those interactions. Even if you're an introvert, setting goals to do that is really, really helpful. Because again, the more you know about the system that you're in and your opportunities, the more you know of what your opportunities are and how you may or may not getting them where you're at now.
Yeah. And especially that's so important, because this pandemic is going to screw a lot of people over. And the people that it's screwing over are the people who rely a lot of the time on those in-person, those serendipity interactions that now, working from home removes that chat at the coffee when you find out what your colleagues are earning, but you don't tell them that, that time where you bump into your line manager's manager in the lift and you can tell them how good you've been doing. All of that stuff, which you don't get now, needs to be replaced. And organizations aren't really rushing to replace those types of interactions in reality. There's not like a forum where it's like, let's just have random shuffle on Slack and see who you can meet today. But that's actually what happens at the canteen all the time. So in reality, you've really got to set objectives and goals for how you can broaden and enrich that network that you have, whether that's on a platform like LinkedIn, whether now things are reopening, making sure that you're going out and reconnecting with those people that you haven't seen in a while, just to understand what's changed, just to understand, so actually you've got this great settlement where you can now work from home when I'm still told that I can go in, or, they're paying for your travel now. Like all of this other stuff which you didn't realize has happened in the pandemic, or they sorted this out for that person or that. There's this great delta which is emerging now effectively. And that delta might just be an information delta, or it could be something very tangible. The problem is you won't know unless you find out. So you really do need to set the objectives just to keep hot on the iron. Go out and talk to people and see what's happening again. And even if you're introvert, set the objectives to make that happen, because it's so important. So there's another thing which I wanted to come on, and please do not forget to put your questions in the chat as well. Obviously super keen to get through a few more topics, and especially if there's anything for Jeffrey as well before he has to depart. But this particularly affects the Black community, minorities in general, and it's like the 2-for-1. And it's like, great, like, we now recognize that things are different in the world and there's lots of D&I work to be doing. Why don't you do it? That's great. And you can be in our photos, you can help write some of our policies, you can help do all of this other stuff, great stuff for us, but you're still going to do the same job as well, and you're not going to get any more comp for it. The 2-for-1. And actually, a lot of people have found themselves, whether it be a personal calling, whether it be kind of a slide pushing into, whatever the reason is, a lot of people have found themselves in that delta where they feel they're effectively doing 2 jobs for the price of 1. How do you reconcile with that idea, and how can people help themselves get the most out of that type of encounter opportunity, or maybe it's not an opportunity? How do you negotiate your salary? Can you get compensated for doing that? Tell me what you're thinking when you hear this 2 for 1.
So when people tell me they're doing 2 things for the price of 1, I generally do think don't do it. Like literally say no. It's within your rights, not in your job spec, and walk away, or encourage them to hire someone that is a diversity professional to write the policy and to devise what is happening around diversity inclusion in their organization. Because you doing your role, you don't necessarily understand the parameters of the whole business and how D&I interjects and interweaves with it. You're coming at it from a very personal perspective, and what they need is someone that's going to look at it from the business perspective. I think so. I would kind of say to anyone that's kind of spoke to me about that, push back and say that's not my job. I do think if you then decide that you do want to do that, I think before you say yes, you have to ask about what support are you going to have, what investment are they going to give you. So are you actually going to have a budget to deliver things? You can say to them that you can give a timeline of how long you're willing to do it before they then have to pony up with some cash. And I think it's then you have to be direct with your decision as well, and know that you're willing to walk away from something, even though you know and you think that D&I is an imperative and it needs to be in your business and people need to understand this and all those kind of things, that kind of conviction that you probably have as to why they're probably pulling you into this. You have to put that on hold and think about self and think, am I going to be emotionally able to do all of this? Because D&I work is not easy. There are lots of conversations that you have to have that drain you on a daily. And I think it's, a lot of time when you walk into that space, you don't know that. You kind of see the fun. Oh, I'm going to plan an event for Pride. I'm going to do something for Black History Month. I'm going to invite in speakers. But then there's a lot of other bits that flow into it where you're actually looking at policy, where you're speaking to people that are well-intended, but they don't necessarily understand the ramifications of how it impacts their business. And then you're having to kind of readjust and inform those individuals. And that takes a lot out of you. So I think it's those moments of, for me, looking at that, deciding whether that's what you want, whether that's the journey you want for your career as well. Because if you want to be a CEO or the head of marketing, running the D&I efforts, it might not actually take you there. So I think it's, again, your personal goals. And I haven't really answered your question, but I'm kind of like, don't do it. That's my position. So I'm probably not going to give anything more than that. I'm sure Mandy's probably got some really good tips. But I'm like, don't do it. Say no.
Here's the thing. Okay. So retention for companies is so important because hiring is so expensive that if you're in a board meeting and you're on what is called the comp committee, so people who talk about compensation, there are 3 statistics they look at. 1, what's your hire rate? 2, what's your promotion rate? And 3, what is your churn rate? Meaning how fast are you losing employees? Because that shit is expensive. So let's stop doing it. So part of giving you a 2 for 1, if you will, is like, trying to connect to that intrinsic value you have in work and that other stuff that you like to do so that you feel fulfilled at work, not just half filled, but fulfilled at work. However, that fulfillment has to be in service to something greater. And so if you're going to do anything out of your scope at work, anything, if it is not being recognized as a bonus, if you are not getting exposure to leadership, and if you're not gaining extra skills that you can talk about in interviews, then don't do it. But I personally have gone through my career knowing that the job that I have right now is not the one I want to have in 5 years. So I'm going to try to do as many things within this company because there's an infrastructure. We have so many things that are available, especially in corporate companies, that I'm going to take advantage of all of this. And if that means I'm going to join an employee resource group, here are the things that I want out of it if I'm not getting paid. And if I can't get these things, then I'm not going to do it. And so it's very much Jeffrey's point, like, don't do it unless you know what you're in it for. Because I will tell you the reason that I became the global head of D&I at New Relic was because I knew that I didn't want to be a sales director forever. And I knew that leading an employee resource group was going to give me exposure to leadership. It was going to give me exposure to other parts of the company and exposure to all the people I wanted information from to understand how I was going to move from this job to that job. So that was what was in it for me. And that's what I did it for. And that's what I worked towards. And I tell everyone who's a part of an employee resource group, whether at my company or a different one, like, if you are not in it for that, which you absolutely should be, then do something else. Take off work early.
Wow. And you stole my next question. That's actually about the ERGs actually as well, because a lot of people, have been asked and feel, again, whether it's a personal calling or not, to set one up in the last kind of year or so. What are some of the things that they should be asking for as they do so, though, from your perspective? So I know both of you kind of approached about it as kind of like strategically from my career planning, what am I thinking about it? But as in like, okay, so I want to run the ERG in our company. I want to do something from that. As leaders who have worked with ERGs and people who are leading those types of resource groups, and I'm using the acronym employee resource groups for those who weren't aware, like what is actually the things that employee resource groups need to be successful?
So I think as you set up your employee resource group, the question is, who's my executive sponsor? So which of our leaders in this organization is going to mentor me to make sure that what I'm delivering aligns to the business goals and the business objectives in line with my community that I represent within the ERG. I think it's also, back to Mandy's point, what is your career ambition? So what do you want to learn from being a part of this ERG? So is it that you want to know more about budgeting? So, most organizations are giving their ERGs a bit of money to delve in and do things. So do you want to now kind of explore what it means to run a budget, or to look at your marketing skills or your, presentation design skills? So what are the tangible things that you want to get from being a part of that? Then also, what's the timeline? How long are you going to do it for? Because a lot of people get given this gift of the ERG and then they sit in it for 5 years. Effectively, what you should do is go in, be within that ERG for max 2 years, deliver some big ticket things and move on, and encourage others coming into the business to step into the void that you're filling. I think it's also that piece of, as you think about the ERG and setting it up, depending on what your organization does, how are you going to use the platform to connect to consumers? So over the years that I've been working in the D&I space, you hear about the ERGs that are successful are the ones that then take their community's viewpoint and vision and align it back to the business, and whether that's designing a new product that goes to market and does really well, whether that's looking at how they can find new consumers or new customers and how they engage in that way. So I think it's kind of looking at all those different steps of, for you as the individual walking into this role, how do you demonstrate your business acumen back to the organization? So the multicultural food day, scrap that. You're really looking at going in on this is about my demonstration of how I understand this organization that I work at, and I understand the value my community can bring to your business, and that you need to know that having me here is a plus, but also having more of us here will be a plus, and also understanding how we show up outside of this organization to engage with your business is also a plus. So I kind of always talk about it in that way. That's how I kind of look to set up the ERGs that I've set up over the years. And it's really kind of pushing them to look back to the business, have that mentor that isn't me as a D&I lead, but as someone in the organization who is sitting at a C-suite level, who understands the trajectory of where it's going, and then how this team fits into it. And that leader is actually going to have honest conversations with you and say, something, this doesn't work for now, and give you the reason why. It's not just yes, go off and do it, have fun. No. This has to kind of sit in that kind of space. So yeah, that's kind of my viewpoint.
Amazing. Mandy, is there anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, I would agree with everything Jeffrey said, especially around the part of the ERG you want to play. I've been in ERGs where someone wants to be level up in the PR on the PR team, or level up on the comms team. So it makes a lot of sense for them to do that multicultural food day, because they're dealing with vendors, they're dealing with dates, they're figuring out how to do internal marketing. And then you have the budgeting person who may not be in finance, maybe wants to be, or is in finance and wants to learn better systems. Like these are all things that, and you don't actually have to know when you first go into the ERG, and that's part of the fun of it. But do what interests you, and then you get to know better, like what you're drawn to and what really excites you and energizes you, so that you can think about how to incorporate that into your full-time job.
Amazing. And we've got like about 10 more minutes just before Jeffrey goes. So if there are any final questions on that, do pop them in the chat. But I've got another supermarket analogy. So if that was the 2 for 1, this one is, as they call it, well, the bog off, the buy one get one free. What is it if somebody effectively gives you that? Great. Well, can't give you the pay rise or anything like that, but we'll give you a promotion without one. So do more work for us for nothing. What about that?
I do know something. You have choices. I think that's when you say goodbye. I think there's this piece of there's a couple of things I would say to everybody. You know, every month we get paid. You need to save your mad money, and your mad money needs to be 6 months of of your outgoings that you've managed to save. And I know that's not always easy to do, but you should start that process as much as possible to really kind of think about that you have that cash sitting there. And then if someone offers you a situation like the above off, it's your decision to decide whether you want to stick around and actually do that, or whether you want to say, you know something, thank you for the opportunity, but it's now time for me to move on. Because I think sometimes when you think about it, anyone that walks into that situation, you're probably going to walk into it under duress, and you're not going to be happy, and you're not going to do your best. So at that moment, I think it's that decision of, if you do decide to do it, how are you going to leverage up, and what's the time frame? So, you know something, I would do it for 6 months, and then I'm coming back to you, and I expect you to know how you're going to remunerate me in the right way, change my job title, change my leveling. If not, unfortunately, I will be leaving after that point. So you've given them a clear statement of your intention, so they know that actually, you know something, this person's serious. I've got this time frame, and then they're going. And then if you come back within that time frame and they say, oh, I still haven't got the cash, you've got to go. You've got to be like, you know something, it's time for me to move on.
Yeah, as Jeffrey said, it's all about setting expectations, because often when that happens, the bug off, I haven't heard that. It's when someone either gets fired unexpectedly and they don't have anyone to fill their position, or there's some desperate circumstance where someone like really needs you to do 2 jobs. And if you have expectations of like, okay, I understand this is the situation, I want to stay at this company because of X, Y, and Z. Again, as Jeffrey said, what are the circumstances by which I'll get out of the situation, I'll get a pay raise, etc.
It's often also spun as kind of like, this is a learning and development opportunity. It's like, oh, well, how about you do it to show us you can do it, and then we'll kind of, pay you once you're doing it already. Like, it's a good opportunity to learn more, get more exposure, when in reality, you're doing the work for free.
So that actually happened to me early on in my career. Someone did say to me, oh, there's this opportunity. I think that if you do it for like 4 months, and then we will do this. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it for nothing. Like, effectively, what we can do is, you can put me in the role, you can pay me the salary of that role, and then if it doesn't work out, you can bump me back to where I was and put me back on the salary that I had before. It's a win-win either way, because I'm sure I'm going to do fantastically. And I think there's a little bit of you being able to have the confidence to also say yes or no, and know that you can sit in your truth of the no. Because I think the no is such a hard word to say, and it doesn't always have to be a hard no. It could be no, not now. No, we need to negotiate, so forth and so forth. So yeah.
Yeah, no, amazing. And here's a question which has come through, which is, any tips for freelancers or contractors? How do you make sure you're paid fairly when your day rate looks expensive compared to maybe other rates in payroll? Not sure if D&I stats are even recorded for freelancers, potentially as well for contractors. Sometimes it's like, oh, we'll extend your contract, but then maybe you've been there for a year already, and actually, if you're an FTE, you might get a bump up. So any thoughts to that, Mandy, potential?
Yeah. Again, I think it's about the research that you do. If you feel like you're being underpaid, or you're scoping yourself too low, you probably are. And if people are saying yes too easily to your jobs, you're probably scoping it too low. So it's a combination of understanding that what you're getting right now is because of what you're asking for. And if you want to ask for something more, you might get a few more no's, but you are going to be paid more by the people who say yes, who also agree that on the value that you are showing them that you have. So I think it's a matter of just testing it out. if you're not quite sure how to do it. But if it's whether it's freelancing where you're setting the price, or they're saying like, here's how much we pay for this contract, and you're saying, okay, well, it's all, again, it's negotiation. Okay, this is actually my rate here, and it seems like you're coming in lower. Then, and if they say we can't pay you more, then it's like, okay, what are the other things you can do? And again, as Jeffrey was saying earlier, like you have to be at peace with saying no.
Yeah. Jeffrey, anything more to add? I've got one final question, but I want to ask you before as well.
No, nothing to add there.
Cool. And this goes to both folks. But what can go wrong? I know obviously you said sitting in that comfortableness about, having comfort to say no, or actually saying, okay, that won't work for you. But a lot of the fear that we have is like, for example, when we talk to candidates about doing this, in the early part of their career, or when they're getting a job, people are like, oh, will they take the offer away then? Or, if I'm unsuccessful in my negotiation, will they revoke the offer? Or, will they think that I'm really greedy? Or will this mean that, they won't promote me? Like, what are all the things that can go wrong? And I suppose how do you think about those or evaluate that?
So I would say, in all honesty, when they're hiring, when they're promoting people, there is a conversation of, oh, if they decide to ask for more, what can we provide? So there's as we said before, there's a banding. So when they offer you a role, most of the time they are offering you with the scope of, oh, there's potential for them to grow in this role. So then we still have this amount of the pot to be able to pay out at a later stage, or they have these capabilities, but they might need to grow these two. So for that reason, we're going to offer them this price. So I would say to everybody, you need to ask. You always need to say kind of, I'm really excited to get this offer, but what's the wiggle room here? Could you go to this? And that should be your counter offer. So it's not an outright no. It's a, yes, I want to come here, but what's your wiggle room? And then, again, if they come back and say to you, we have no wiggle room, you then have to make that decision of that's where you want to go. But I'd also say you then negotiate up for other things. So as you mentioned, Ashley, more holiday, healthcare, a development opportunity. So you think about the scope, because it's not just the base that you really want. You kind of need all the other add-ons to make sure that you're having a comfortable experience when you go into their organization. And I do think all the research says, people of color, women don't negotiate, and straight white men do. And I think it's that piece of, we all need to lean into that piece of, it's our right to negotiate, because you want to walk in that front door on your first day feeling like, not only am I joining an organization that I'm really excited about, but I got what I needed to be here. And because walking on the first day feeling like, well, they're not even paying me what I wanted, doesn't kind of ingratiate you to have a brilliant experience there. So yeah.
I agree.
Amanda, have you heard of any horror stories or anything going wrong? Is that an unfounded fear? Because a lot of the time people think, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Is that just a fear that people have? Is it a misperception?
No.
Yeah.
Shit goes wrong all the time.
I've never heard of it happening, if I'm being honest. I've never heard that someone said, oh, here's your offer, and they've said, oh no, can you go up a bit? And then they've said, oh, no, we're not going to offer you the role. I think they've either come back and said, no, we can't do that. We're already at the limit of what we had budgeted for this role, and then you ask the question of, oh, so what's your timeline for correcting this if I do join?
Right.
And then it's like, oh, we do pay reviews at this point. So then there's always an answer to the question that you could ask around what your pay was as you walk in the front door. I think it's harder when you're actually there to do some of those conversations. But before you join, that's you can set timelines, you can set expectations, you can say, something, I want to, what you want to see, and effectively get it in writing as well if you're smart. And you can,
sure.
Make things happen.
Agree that pay review in 3 months' time then. Let's, I'll do my onboarding, I'll do my probation. Once I can do the job, let's have that conversation then.
Yeah. And if you're having someone offer you a job, they want you to start at the company, because again, they've probably interviewed a lot of people. Hiring people is really, really hard. Especially if you're a person of color, like that is a plus for them because it ups their representation stats, whether they're tracking them or not. And so, yes, as Jeffrey said, like it's really hard to lose in the actual negotiation process for a job. It's definitely when you're in the role, and if you're going about the conversation the wrong way, meaning saying I deserve this, when am I getting a raise, but not having any like substance behind it, that's when you can be seen as like a complainer, someone who's always asking for more. It's never enough. So doing your work up front, I think, is really important.
Amazing.
So I
But
need
Jeffrey,
to
I know you've
depart.
got to shoot, so I just want to say a big thank you. Thank you for the time, and
Thanks
I
for
hope you
having
have
me.
an amazing evening.
I will. Thank you so much. Nice to see you
Bye,
again,
Jeffrey.
Mandy.
You
Hopefully
too,
see you soon.
Jeffrey.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Ashley.
Cheers, thanks. So brilliant. So thanks, Mandy. So just for our audience as well, we do have a little bit more time as well. So if there are any questions, please do pop them in the chat, and we'll continue for a little while longer with myself and Mandy. So Mandy, kind of my next kind of question to that, that kind of like, what could go wrong, and I suppose thinking about it from the other point of view, because I suppose in a way you've probably been on it on both sides of the table. So when you're thinking about it, not as I'm going to negotiate my salary, but I'm the employer in the room, and I suppose my interest is to save my money. What are some of the things that people are thinking about on the other side of the table when they're really evaluating if this makes sense, if they want to move, if they can move, if this person is worth it? What sort of things are they really considering, and how do they make those decisions in the end?
Yeah. I think what's really important to understand is that if someone is working for you and you like working with them and they're performing, like, you don't want to lose them. And you also, like, the approach I've always taken to management is like, I am your glorified coach. I am your glorified like cheerleader. I am your glorified secretary and assistant. Like, my job is to make you successful. And any way in which I can do that, and moreover, prove to you that I'm willing to do that, then I know that you're going to be a better performer, because you're going to have that trust in me that I got your back. So when someone comes to me for a pay raise, I'm like, cool. All right. How are we going to do this? Let's make a game plan. And I will go to bat for those people, especially if they're of value to me, especially if we're working as a team. And so it's, for my job, again, is to understand how all the systems work, to get myself that power that a lot of frontline managers don't, because they're not asking the right questions of their superiors. So like, I don't know that information. So they're just like, whatever. But if you can't get a raise, for someone who works for you, what are the other things that you can get them? Or what are the things that you can do that will get them excited to keep working for you, because you want to have them around? So again, it really does behoove managers and your manager to advocate for you to get a raise, for the simple fact that they want to have you around. That's it. Again, if it's a team sport, it's usually a lot easier. But those are some of the things we're thinking about. And then again, like at the end of a quarter, at the end of a fiscal year, there's always, if your company's doing okay, there's always extra money to distribute. And knowing ahead of time as a manager, like, how you're going to do that. Are you going to distribute it across your team? Are you going to give it to the top 2 people? And decide like how you're going to talk about that with your team. Are you going to tell them, hey, it just so happens that Jay over here got a bonus. I don't know how he got it, when in fact that you were the one who chose him. But I think it's really important. You have to decide what level of transparency you want. And for me, it's always been full transparency, because I think it works better for me and my team.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's a lot of things that come into it.
But that is a management guide. But I know there was no, but there has to be a but, because I've worked for people which don't take that approach. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
like, yeah. I think we've all seen those folks in the workplace which are like, yeah, like, your job is to work for me. Like, do you know what I mean? But I'm not here to try and help you out. I'm looking after my own back, and you do your job. Keep your head down, work hard, and things will come. That kind of narrative, so to speak. And I suppose, how do you work in that circumstance? Because I've been there, and to share an analogy, like I've said, actually no, it's time to go. Like, do you know what I mean? It was that time which I was saying that it was linked to the company bonus. It was like, if you agree my performance is thing, you can't do anything if you're not willing to go any further. Like, I know that my time here is done. You know that as well, and I'm just going to be waiting, taking my pay until I find the right opportunity for me to move, and there's nothing you can do about it. And not that nothing that you can, but you have chosen not to do anything more about it, so we know where we sit. And I think that there has to be a level of comfort and flexibility in knowing, well, actually, if you're a good performer, if you're doing good work, you will be able to, find a job which is better for you, frankly, whether that's on the comp side. You don't even have to necessarily get paid more. You might get paid the same. You might even take a pay cut if the environment and the other things in that place make it a better place for you to work. I speak to a lot of my friends about the trap, and it's that we constantly we're getting more money. I can't leave now, I'm gonna have a kid, I'm gonna have the mortgage, and they get caught in the trap, so to speak. But I think there needs to be a comfort in knowing, actually, if you're on the trap, that's actually a sign that you're probably not batting hard enough in a way, because if they want to keep you that much, someone else will probably want you that much. and will want you really much. And actually, therefore, how are you extracting that value in whatever way, whether that's money, whether that's time, whether that's the car that I can drive to work, like whatever it is, that flexible working policy, all those sorts of things which come into this as well, which a lot of the time people don't necessarily think as well. So I suppose my next kind of question to that is, so I think we all now know we want you as our manager. Because I do. I mean, that would be great. But I would say I've maybe had 2 managers, which I'd say is would bat for me out of maybe the 5 or 6 I've had. So what would you say for those folks who are not with one of those people, who aren't necessarily team players?
So a couple things. So true. People leave companies, but they quit managers. They quit managers because at the end of the day, the relationship you have with your next manager is so very important. And if you don't feel supported by that person, you're not going to be as successful as you want to be. And if they're not going to, support you in the way you want to be supported, you have to look for it elsewhere. So whether that's your manager or a different manager or someone on a different team, you want to have someone in your company who is in a leadership position that you can ask questions to. And that's what is so great about employee resource groups or even affinity groups. For me, it was finding that one other Black woman who was a leader at my company and being okay, we got to chat, we got to talk. And then just through that relationship, I felt more comfortable having conversations with my white male manager because I had role played things with her. And so developing those connections, especially in this virtual world of reaching out to those people saying, hey, I want to connect, and getting to know people who you feel more comfortable with, maybe if you don't feel comfortable with your manager, will enhance the conversations you're having with them. And also, because you spend so much time with these people, even if it is just on Zoom or over Slack, you want to feel that they're helping you progress in your career. And if they're not, you're going to see so many red flags. And a lot of them come up when you ask for something and they don't get it for you. And it's usually not because they couldn't, it's because they either didn't have the skills to do it, they didn't know how to do it themselves, or they just don't like you that much.
And if it's a lot, you know what to do. So just on that first part, because I know you said the skills, and I mean, very tangibly, earlier in the conversation, you spoke about a time where you basically rolled out the PowerPoint. You were like, here's the business case, so to speak. And it has kind of been mentioned before about, okay, well, maybe you present a bit of a business case. From both sides of the table, what does that actually look like? And not to say, oh, I need to go out to the CEO and say, I need a pay rise tomorrow. But, is there something you should have in a conversation? Should you write it out? Should you send your manager something before? Does this go to your manager first? Should it go to HR? Just processually, how do you feel about going about some of this?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I did, and that's not what you should do. I built a PowerPoint, didn't talk to anyone, booked a meeting with the COO of the segment. I was in radio at the time, and was shaking in my boots, and he just laughed at me. He's like, what? Why are you talking to me about this? He's like, you're great. I think you're great. But I didn't have any information about where the company was going. I didn't have any information about whether or not my manager was even talking about me when I wasn't in the room. And if I had talked to my peers, talked to my manager and said, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and understood that my manager sending me in there without the right tools should have been a sign that she didn't give it like a rat's butt about me. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I'm setting you up to fail, really. Go and talk to the wrong person about the wrong things.
Yeah. And so again, it's all about understanding how to navigate, like navigating the relationships in your company, especially virtually, is 50% of your job. 50%. We used to call it politics, but now we call it navigating. And like that, if you want to get where you need to go, you need to know how to get there. You got to know how to get there. And I cannot emphasize that enough.
Got it. And then just I'll have like one final question here, and if there is any more in the audience, please do let us know as well. But it's actually around that kind of that navigating point, and I think from my personal experience, I think it's kind of like that counsel, speak to people, find out those mentors and those allies and those sponsors and those people who talk about you outside of the room, because that's one thing that you really mentioned. It's like, oh, I didn't know if my manager was talking about me. Like, I suppose from that navigating, how do you find out stuff like that? Like, when do you know that you know? Like, when do you, it kind of goes back to that first question, which is like, when do you know is the right time? When do you know that the things are stacked in order for you to do that? I know there's a few checkpoints that you mentioned as well, so maybe around that like end of year moment or those end of quarters, depending on how the organization works. But some of those softer factors, when do you know your manager's on your side compared to just going out Ben or Jill or Jackie? Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that those are the times. So the great managers that I've had, they bring this stuff up. And I know that they don't only bring it up with me, but they bring it up with a lot of people, even if they're not performing. That's when I know that person's great. And I think understanding that when your manager isn't doing something for you, it's two things. It's one, it's oftentimes they don't have the skill to do it. I cannot tell you how many managers, especially white male managers, God bless them all, I've had a lot of them. A lot of them are promoted to positions where they are not with no people management skills. They have the technical skills because they were a great individual contributor, but they're a terrible people manager. And so the skills that they need to go advocate for you, to keep you a high performer, they just don't have, and no one is teaching them. And so having an eye out for those types of things, like when you ask let's say you're going on parental leave or you're going on medical leave, like how well do they handle that situation? What's their bedside manner around it? If they're like really like uncomfortable and flippant about it, then that tells you something. If you are asking them about pay structure and they don't have the answers, there's been no reason for them to figure it out, and they don't know. And so just because someone is telling you that they're not able to do something, it's often because they just don't know how, and they're too afraid to go find out. So you have to be the person that's not afraid to go find out and do your own research, so that when you come to your manager, all they have to do is push that easy button. Go to them. It's like, I've done my research. Here's the pay band. It looks like, Sally's over here at this pay band. I aligned our skills. I even talked to her, and it turns out we're doing the exact same job, but she's being paid 10K more. So like, how can I help you make sure that we're paid evenly so that you don't look like a jackass? And it's just like, see, all you have to do is go to so-and-so. I already told her about it, and boop, just tell her that you approve. And the more often you can do that, make your manager's life easy for you, the more they're going to be like, oh, this person's so great. They make my life so easy.
But, and here's one thing that, I mean, I have no problem doing this, but it's not the Ashley show. Like, some people say that's so aggressive, like, and you dropped in a little bit of that whole, well, maybe you look like a jackass. Like, a lot of people, that's like, oh my gosh.
You don't want to say that, obviously.
Yeah, no, I mean, don't say that. That's one thing that we'll say. But like, how, like, should you be that aggressive? Should you say, I'm black in the workplace, I know that I'm part of this pay gap that we see in this company report all the time. What are you doing about it? Do you go to that level? Is it appropriate to talk about the fact that, hey, is the organization paying me less because of the color of my skin? Like, is it that deep? Because so many managers I know, one, it's actually not down to them. Two, they won't have the skills to know how to do it. Three, they'll look like a cat in the headlights, be like, "Oh my god, what's happening?" Like, just don't report me, please. Like, HR button, let's do something now. but not necessarily what I want them to do, which is pay me more. But it's like, let me get ahead of this racist complaint that's about to happen. So
yeah, and for us, you know, we got to have a plan. We cannot just kick a door down and be like, I need to be paid more with like no case, because that scares people, and like we're already scary enough, you know. So yes, I think it is all about having a game plan. Like you, from the moment you walk in the door, like your number one job is to form a really good relationship with your boss. And that doesn't mean that you like bring them brownies every day and do the brown nosing stuff. It's like just asking the curious questions around what they do. How does this part work? I'm really interested in this. Is this something you can help me with? Who do you recommend I go talk to about X, Y, and Z? Because you want to use them as your research to get to know other people within the company so that you yourself can get exposure. And then once you have that exposure, you have power. You have power. And I think that is really, really important. The more people you know, and the more people who know what you're doing, the more power you have, because you're not hiding behind your manager and your manager isn't hiding you underneath them.
Aaron just asked a question. Oh, sorry, Mandy. Sorry, go on.
No, it's okay. I'm going to answer this. So I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. I think it's you're all the time is the right time. And it's less about asking and more about like, I would need to know when this stuff is happening. So you're finding out when those times are and what you need to do to be a part of that bonus structure. And if you're asking for a hike, then it's again understanding like, hey, can you help me understand like what I would need to be able to do to get a pay raise? Like that's the easiest conversation. When it's not the right time. Probably when you're not doing well.
Yeah.
Would be the right time. Like if you're in sales and you're not hitting quota, not a good time.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. I think, you know, I've seen people ask, you know, after a round of redundancies, and people are like, what? But actually, it's like, well, but they look, listen to how they spun it. They were like, well, you've actually decided to keep me, and you know I'm a high performer. So actually, like, what's happening for me, because I'm worried about where the company's going. Is my long-term direction here, or are there going to be another round of layoffs? Should I be going as well? That's actually how it was spun. And it sounds crazy, but you can kind of see where they're coming from now. Like, do you know what I mean? You can see the logic in it. I think obviously, yeah, like, you know, if you're not performing well, it's a very easy way to say, well, you know, you're not hitting your targets, you're not doing what you need to be doing, you're not in the band, you know, you're not meeting the requirements of your job. Probably not the right time to be doing it. Again, there are better times than worse times. You know, again, think about where the budget year is. Think about when quarters and stuff is happening. Like, obviously, if you're asking when there isn't the money in the table, okay, you might get the conversation 3-6 months down the line, but it might not be then. So you might want to time it when people are doing their budget planning for next year, not wait until the budget's approved, because by then they've budgeted you out of it. So again, have a think about some of those things and think about it. But in terms of when there's not the right time, you should always kind of be teeing up the conversation. So actually, when the time is right, you're ready to do it, rather than thinking about, this is a blunt conversation, I'm going to think about doing it on May the 12th, and this is what's going to happen then. Think about, actually, there's a few things going around. These are the times that it makes more sense than others. And that's how I would think to it.
Yeah, I have a dog.
No, don't worry, it's fine. We can see it. I'm almost home.
My parents come over and they leave their dog here. And this is not even my dog, it's my parents' dog. He's just been abandoned again. And now he's thirsty. Like, why are you
there we go. He's negotiating with you. And you see, there's the power of the conversation. I know Mandy's busy right now, so I'm gonna get what I want. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what happens when you ask a question not paying attention.
It's the same for your salary. Get your boss when they're happy, when things are going well, when it's easy to say yes and difficult to say no. You know, make it easy for people. That's the other thing. Tell them, spell it out. Tell them how much it is, do the research for them, write the case for them. So when they need to go to their manager or HR or whatever, it's there. Like, how can they say no? And scenario plan. If they say no, well, I know you can do something about, like, you know, my annual leave, or I know you can do something about the medical care. Like, can I be bumped up? Can I get my family on the care as well? Because I'm paying this after tax. All this other stuff. Yeah, there's a million things you can go out there and think about. So always be thinking about that conversation.
Yeah. And I would also say that a not good way to do it is going to your manager out of the blue and saying, hey, I have this other job offer. They're offering me this much. What can you do? That's like putting someone back on their heels. They're like, oh, that's fucked up. Like, this person came to me. I had no idea they were unhappy. I had no idea. And now, even if you do get that pay raise, then they're always going to be suspicious that you're going to be looking for another job, even though you should be always doing that on anyway. But that's not something you talk to people about. And that's not something you want to use as a leveraging tool. Now, if it's something like, I have been talking to my friends or people in the network who are doing the same job in the industry, and someone even reached out to me, like letting me know up front that that's what they're offering and if I wanted to interview. And it was really hard for me to turn down that interview. But I really want to work here. I just need to understand, like, what are the things that I need to be doing to be paid at the same level. See the difference there?
Yeah, so you're not putting them on the back foot. So if you are interviewed, so here's a bit of a thing. So, random recruiter reaches out on LinkedIn. They're like, we've got a job at this great company, and they're, you have a call and you find out the salary band is, I don't know, 20% more than what you're on. So that's your information gathering stage. So then what do? Do you talk to your manager and say, was chatting to a few people, realize that, I'm a software developer here, or like, I'm a marketer here, but actually they're over there, they're getting, the free food and the marshmallows and the massages and also 20% more. So how do you tee that up if you don't come at them with cold and say, got this offer, the door's there unless you're matching it for me?
Yeah. Again, it's all about finesse and going to your manager and saying, like, hey, I'm just curious to know, like, how do you think this company's paid? Like, do you think people are paid pretty well here, evenly? And if they're like, no, then you're like, okay, well, why do you think that is? Or what are the reasons people come here when the salary is lower than they could get somewhere else? And that's their time to, like, really sell you on why you should be here. And then you can say, yeah, I've had a bunch of people reach out to me with the same role, and it's a lot higher. Like, what do you think about that? And that's just your way of, like, again, teeing up the conversation to understand where your manager's head is. How are they thinking about this, and understanding what kind of decision-making power they have. Because if they're saying, I don't know, and if they haven't even thought about this, then they are not the right person to go to. And that's when you start doing your research, around them.
Yeah. And also, you'll get an understanding for how much they want to fight for you. Because, if they're like, well, there's nothing we can ever get anywhere there, then you kind of know your answer. And two, are they willing to really fight, try and get you something more? Are they not? Are they willing to say, look, I don't think we can get the salary to that point in time, but look, what other things matter to you? What can we kind of be doing? How can we make sure there's a way of dealing with that type of conversation? And you'll get a very good understanding of, like, do they want to keep you around or not as well? And that's super important too.
Yeah, especially for us. Like, it's so easy to go from the office pet because, we're Black, we're funny, we have personality.
Let me touch your hair.
Oh my God. We have all of those things that people want, but, like, as soon as we start asking for what you deserve, we become the pest and we become a threat. And it's really that is a very thin line that we jump over without even knowing it. Because, we shouldn't be. First of all, it shouldn't really matter. But, like, we have to act with so much calculation more than our white counterparts, because it matters. It really does matter. So the more that we can finesse our conversations, the more we can phone a friend and talk this stuff out with other people, it matters, because we are at such a higher risk of retaliation, of kind of being put at the bottom of the list. And that can come in so many different ways. Out here in California, as opposed to, like, the southern part of the United States, like in the South, they'll tell you they're racist. Out here, they will show you. They will show you by not giving you particular resources. They will show you by not inviting you to particular things. And over time, you're just like, why is this stuff happening? And they're like, oh shit, it's because I asked for a raise. It's because I asked for a raise. However, if you know that that's probably more likely going to happen than not, how do you make sure that you are preparing for that from the beginning?
Yeah. And I think in the UK we're probably more on the other end of the spectrum, where, like, people probably won't tell you, but you'll notice it. No, but it's true. Like, people say not at all, but the reality is, The opportunities don't exist in the same way. So here's one final question, because I know we're coming up to time. It was a conversation with my colleagues who told me their pay that helped me to answer the pay that I'm actually worth. It's hard to break the culture in the UK because it's not common. Exactly. And regardless of whether it's not common as well, like, you don't even have to have a conversation with your colleagues. Glassdoor, like, you know what I mean? People are coming in, people are leaving, what the industry is getting paid. You don't need to know what anyone in your company is getting paid, as long as you know what the market's paying. That's enough information and insight for you to be able to say, well, I know what I'm worth, I know what the industry is going to pay me, so I can benchmark the rest. That, I don't care what Bill, Joe, James, whatever is getting done, because I understand the value that I'm bringing, and I would always focus it on the value that you bring and what you have, and that value to the company, and therefore the compensation for that value is just fair, really. And actually try and go down the angle of, well, if you're not going to give me that, you agree that I bring this value, so you accept you're doing something which is unfair then, no? You accept you're getting me cheaply, you accept that you're doing this and exploiting me, you accept that you know that Bill's getting paid more than me, we do the same job, and you're not going to pay me the same. Like, once you spell things out like that, then people don't want to accept that. People don't want to hear that. People don't want you to go and tell somebody else that. And that's the thing. So yeah, if it's too difficult to have those conversations with your colleagues or whatever, look on Glassdoor. Ask people if you're friends with them once they've left. Once they've left the org, it's like, oh yeah, you were doing this role, or I thought you were doing this thing. I'm going through this thing, this situation right now. I know you're out of the organization. Would love to understand where you were in that band, just to help me. Especially if you've got those good relationships. They've not got any more skin in that game. That can help you potentially. People might ask you those things too.
Yeah, and often, like, I think another thing that we need to recognize or understand is that anytime we go and talk to a leader, they're often coming back and talking to our manager to be like, hey, Mandy came to me and she asked me these questions, like, what's going on? So it's also important to understand that when you're going around your manager to get answers to things, like, beware that may come back. So the more you can just ask out of curiosity, like, go to your people place and be like, hey, I'm just curious. My friend is looking to pay a freelancer, and she's looking to understand, like, what kind of pay bands we use. Like, can you tell me what kind of pay bands we use? Or, hey, I'm curious to know more about our talent review. Is that something you can fill me in on? Take the person to a virtual coffee or send them a coffee or whatever. But again, just learning how the system works. You got to understand the system so that you know where you sit in it and how you're supposed to navigate through it. And that is, like, the very, very number one most important thing, and everything else will fall into place. But yeah, and also what Ashley was saying is, like, you want to know where your boss stands. And if they're giving you all these cues that they either don't care or don't have the skills, we have to listen out for those.
Yeah, exactly. They might not tell you, but they will tell you in a different way. Their actions will tell you a bit about it, and yeah, what people say outside of you in the room is use that network, use that leverage, and let people associate your work being good. If people only consider you or only hear about you as the person who's doing the good work, then when those other conversations start to happen, that it creates that affinity around, well, this is the person we don't want to lose. This is a person who we want to be promoting. This is a person we want to be helping out. So, create that narrative for yourself as well. Let people know that you're going above and beyond. Tell people when you're doing things as well. Just make people aware of the good work that you're doing, because that attitude of get your head down, work hard, and things will just grow and show doesn't really exist, to be honest. And the best evidence is look at some of the people running the companies these days. Do you know what I mean? It's like, they're not the only people who are doing good jobs, were they? So so there you go. That's the diversity. So look, that's where we are. We are out of time, and I just would like to say a massive thank you to Mandy. We're hearing the comments here as well. So many great talking points. We have recorded this, and we will work out how we cut it up and share the insights with everybody. It's actually been my favorite. I'm actually going to WhatsApp someone and say it's my favorite conversation, because I've actually enjoyed this massively. I only wish we had done it sooner and more. So watch this space. Maybe there will be. But so a massive thank you again to Mandy. Mandy, where can people find you? Where can people see what's going on? Where can people learn, connect? Obviously, we know you're on LinkedIn. So there's that. But tell us, what can people find you from?
Yeah, you can find me at my website, mandybynum.com. I refuse to say those 3 W's because everyone knows it's 3 W's, but I love when people do. mandybynum.com, or you can go to the raceequalityproject.com, see what we're doing there. Raceequalityindex.com, or at Mandy Bynum on all the socials.
Amazing. Jeffrey, well, he's missed the opportunity, but you can find him on LinkedIn as well. He's doing some great work. Watch out. Rocking Your Teens as well is a great organization which you set up. Obviously, if you want to find out about us, Color in Tech, colourintech.org, put us in Google or Yahoo if people still use that. Bing, what's the other one? What are they? After Alexa, Siri, one of them will tell you. So go and do those as well. Don't worry, we love the folks at Microsoft.
Ashley, I wish I could see you in person. I wish I could teleport to London and just give you a big hug. It's been so
What does that
long.
mean? We'll break social distancing when we're allowed.
Yes.
And I refuse to leave that too long. So I will be out over there as soon as I can if you don't make it here first. But with that, thank you everybody for tuning in. Have a great evening. Go and start teeing up those conversations now. I want everybody to reply back to our comms telling us that it's worked and that they've got more, and then they can all buy us complimentary coffee to say thank you. And you will be able to
latte, 4 shots.
You've got the salary. Sorry, Maddie, what was that?
Dirty chai latte, 4 shots of espresso, almond milk, please. Thank you.
Woo! Woo! That's an expensive order at Starbucks. I'll get everything on the menu and the frat, please too. So with that, lots of love, everybody. Have a great evening or morning, and thank you, Mandy, as well. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.